Hey everybody, welcome to HackerCast. I think we're at episode 34, which is kind of crazy.
Mhm.
We're back this week after a short hiatus last week due to lots of stuff going on internally at White Hat, which is always fun. Scheduling, yay. And yeah, so with me is Robert R. Snake Hansen.
Hello.
We can wave, yeah. And I'm Matt Johansson, and we're without Jeremiah due to the coconut wireless antennas that he has set up outside uh, being on the fritz or something, right?
Who
That's what
knows?
that's what Arsenic told me. I don't know. So
Yeah.
we had a metric buttload, I believe is the scientific term of
That's the
news
technical
stories.
term. Yeah.
Yeah, technical term
Yeah.
to try to go through this week due to not covering anything last week. So we cut out ones that kind of were on the brink of possibly off topic, and so let's just get right into it. So, you know, Robert, what's up with these vendors? The vendors going bad or something?
Vendors going crazy. Yeah. So there is three different vendors. It looks like Tyversa, uh, Tessent, and Kihu. I'm probably pronouncing all these wrong. That allegedly were doing bad things. Three different security vendors in a week. This is kind of crazy. So Tyversa allegedly extorted their own clients. They basically found a fake vulnerability, said you have to pay us for fixing this fake vulnerability that's not really there, and then they called the FTC and got them busted. And actually, that lab that they quote unquote had the vulnerability in or whatever actually ended up going out of business as a result. So that's pretty crazy. And then there's two different Chinese antivirus vendors that
Ugh,
were caught cheating.
ugh.
Yeah, which is which is a kind of a scary set of words. But there's two different Chinese AV vendors that were both lying on their test or whatever for their accreditation for how good they were at finding viruses or whatever. From week to week, they were really bad, and then suddenly amazingly good. So like something's up, and they caught them cheating. So yeah, not a great day for these kind of fly-by-night security vendors, and that just shows what's in a name. I guess it's not, bad people could work anywhere, but I think there's something to be said for companies that have a good reputation, because boy, there's a lot of shady fly-by-night security companies apparently.
Imagine that. Chinese antivirus vendors are not quite on the up and up. Okay. I don't know. Listen, I don't know. Whatever, right? So, okay, moving on from shady vendors doing shady things to shady routers being shady routers, and we like talking about router stories here on HackerCast. We do it every now and then, and we all know that wireless routers that you go and buy off the shelf aren't quite up to date with the best security practices of
The
the
state
world.
of the art.
Yes, they are behind the cybers in terms of security, whatever that means. And yeah, so this time the target was Soho routers, and the attackers were our good friends over at Anonymous. And so Anonymous is being uh, accused. Would that be the
Mhm.
right word?
That's right. That's
Accused
right.
of because there's some evidence, right? But they're being accused by Encapsula of taking over a bunch of these Soho routers and installing their distributed denial of service software on it. Let's see, do we remember the name of the software? Mr. Black is the name of their DDoS tool, right? And it seems to be a close relative of the Lizard Squad's stressor tool. For those of you following along at home of the DDoS tools on the market. So yeah, it looks like there was this botnet being created all over the world with these routers. They use very, very complicated hacking techniques to take over these routers, which includes using the default username and password for these routers that comes out of the box, and no one changes them. So ta-da, you have a botnet. Yeah.
And the really scary part of that is that no one does router forensics anywhere. So it's incredibly likely that that will persist for a very, very long time until someone probably physically removes the hardware, or the cops show up and say, hey, why are you DOSing the White House or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, and it's just ridiculous that we're publishing a white paper in 2015 via a security research company that the taking action, like how to solve this, is to change the freaking default username and password. Okay. Anyway, routers hard to get right apparently, and there are millions of them out there that are completely vulnerable to all sorts of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're kind of in the middle of our story. So this is kind of the furthest off topic, but still kind of interesting enough to make the cut. Robert, what the heck is going on? I wish I didn't type this sentence into Google. What's going on? There's something going on with 3D printers and ammunition, and then there's also something going on with Nazis and child porn. So
yeah, I mean that phrase, 3D printed guns and Nazi child porn, is like that is the perfect echelon trap right there.
Listen, I gave you this story, so this is I get the WordPress phones every week. You get the Nazi child porn. Okay.
So these stories actually may not seem that related, and they kind of aren't, but in a way they are. So the first one was actually the same guy who's been doing. He lives in Austin, actually. The same guy who was doing that 3D printed gun stuff. He got basically told that he's violating ITAR, the actual transmission of weaponry across the border. We kind of got rid of that for a while. That was actually one of the reasons you couldn't use strong cryptography across borders or whatever. But apparently it's back in a fashion with this 3D printed gun. And so what it really means is that the actual file itself, this ones and zeros, is considered a classified munition. And if you have this on a website, you could theoretically be arrested if someone were able to access it overseas or whatever. So that is a different kind of weapon in my book. And so why that's related to the second story. So apparently there was this anniversary of this Nazi war camp. And they're sort of celebrating, or celebrating is probably a strong word. They were remembering what happened there, and I would assume some neo-Nazi who took offense to the whole thing and likes Nazis decided to hack the website and install or upload child pornography to it. And so as a result, the very first thing, the government has to do is go and confiscate the physical computers, right? Because that's evidence, and which is sort of the worst kind of DOS. I mean, when your physical computers get taken from you, what are you going to do, right? So now we're saying, you don't have to be in the possession of child pornography. You could actually use one of these 3D printed gun files and have the same effect, and that's considered a munition. You now have weaponry, potentially, mass devastation or whatever in a file, and that can be a reason why your computers can physically be taken from you by the government or military.
So I'm going to skip around a bit. So this is all really crazy interesting, just weird consequences of nuanced laws that are affecting us as internet security professionals, and that's not what the laws are meant to be affecting, right? So that's really interesting, right? So I'm going to skip around. We had this story last, but this is kind of related. So PayPal actually had a vulnerability this week, or this past week, a remote code execution vulnerability. Due to what was the name of the tool? You were saying it earlier.
Shellifier is what it's called.
Shellifier.
And it attacks the Java debug wire protocol.
That's the one, JDWP. So that's what I was trying to think of, right? So this JDWP opens up port 8000. If you found port 8000 open, you can just unauthenticated, just get access and start executing code. So there's an RCE flaw there, right? So what a weird exploit, right? Hey, if I can execute some code on your machine to get it to pull down some of these files, just kind of, quietly, right? That's not the loudest exploit you could do if you're, if you're executing code on someone like PayPal's servers, right? Then all of a sudden the government has to come and take some of these boxes away. I mean, that's interesting, right? Like obviously, PayPal's got some redundancy, but it's still an interesting consequence of this. But yeah, so, just a little bit more detail about this. It was a a third-party plugin type thing that that PayPal was using. This JDWP, it's a protocol. It's used to communicate between a debugger and the Java virtual machine that it debugs. And for some reason, it just leaves this port open. And this researcher found it. So what I'm really interested in, and they haven't, as far as I can tell, they have not published yet, is how much they paid him for this. Because PayPal is known for giving out some pretty good bug bounties. I think we saw a CSRF bug. What was that? 2 months ago or so? A few months ago. $10,000 they gave him. It's pretty big. So this is
way worse.
Remote code execution. So it's significantly more severe vulnerability. Okay, I just wanted to jump ahead to that. So what's going on in the land of fake mobile apps, Robert? This seemed interesting.
It was. So apparently these bad guys put up this this mobile app that they call Dubsmash 2, which is not to be confused with Dubsmash, because it's definitely not the same company. Dubsmash is some mobile app where you can sort of pretend like you're like singing over somebody else or talking over somebody else or whatever. It's all the rage on social media. But anyway, there's this thing you can download called Dubsmash 2, which is not the same thing, but it looks like it's the same thing. And then when you install it, it basically quickly changes its icon to make it look like it's not what it is. And then what it's actually doing is every 60 seconds, it's downloading a bunch of porn and clicking on a bunch of links, including a bunch of ads. So as a result, what it really is a click fraud generating app. And really the only way you'd notice is if you were watching The Wire, you notice your battery was draining really, really fast, or someone called you and say, hey, you're downloading a lot of porn from your thing through corporate networks or something. depends on how you connect to different wireless networks or whatever. But yeah, I mean, geez, that's pretty gnarly. I mean, I've talked to people before, kind of on the black hat side, about the old school ClickBot A, which the beauty of ClickBot A was that it would click on a bunch of different ads like all over the internet, so you'd never really know who was benefiting from it, but really everyone was benefiting from it. This might be just another incarnation of that, but focused on just porn specifically.
Yep. So this one, actually 500,000 people to date have downloaded Dubsmash 2.
I mean, that's a botnet right there. I mean, that's
pretty significant, right? So the dissection came from Avast, right? Their virus lab. And it looks like the malware originated in Turkey. And yeah, they were just suspecting that he was getting pay per click earnings on these advertisers. So,
Yep.
Interesting. I'd like to see the paycheck. I'd like to see the paycheck he gets from
once upon a time, I had ads on Hackers, and that was right when ClickBot A was coming out. And I made, it jumped up from, I think normally how much money I made was like $20 a day, and it jumped up to almost $1,000 a day when ClickBot A was running. So it definitely, it can be big money if you do it right.
$1,000 a day. All right, let's do this. Let's move to Turkey. All right, so the last one. This deserves probably a podcast of its own. This was a really, really cool bug that was disclosed via HackerOne. I like that. The thing I really like about this is the timeline. So this was actually reported 11 months ago, but then through HackerOne, and you can kind of see the whole timeline if you go to the link that will be in the recap, and it requested that it got to be published publicly last week. So this was a bug in twitter.com. A few people probably use it, right? And mobile.twitter.com. And it was a bypass of the CSRF protection. And the crux of this is that due to some weird browser behavior that who knew happened, is that
no, it's not browser behavior. It's the frameworks.
Yeah, sorry. Misspoke, because he's got a POC in Google and in Safari. That's true. in this framework that they're using. What's the name of the framework? I missed that.
They didn't say. They never said.
They never said which framework it was, right? Okay, but the behavior that's weird is that commas and semicolons in headers, specifically a cookie header, were treated the same way. So, Robert, what was going on with the CSRF token in the? So like they're putting a CSRF token in a cookie.
Yeah. So basically, what they're doing, the important part of this, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, but the important part that's really very interesting is if you submit a cookie and let's say it's something is inserted into a cookie via, in this case, a referring URL. You can put a comma and a referring URL, and it won't get encoded. And then you can put something after it, like username equals Bob or whatever, right? And so when you go to the site, it'll say, hey, your referring URL equals, and then that string, comma, username equals Bob. And normally that wouldn't do anything at all. It would just be one big cookie. But for some reason, certain frameworks, in Twitter included, treats that comma as if it were a separate cookie. So now the username equals Bob part is something that the attacker can now submit on their behalf, which is terrible. Now the question is, what frameworks are actually vulnerable to that? That's going to be the next part of research that no one has really talked about yet.
So if you go and actually read this, if anyone listening is interested, they have the POC URL, which is really, really cool to see, and that this worked on Twitter.com, months ago, right? And so basically, he's setting a CSRF token in, say you sent this link to someone who was authenticated on Twitter.com, right? And there's a link to some, malicious domain of his that he was running. And it's basically saying, okay, take this this parameter CSRF token and set it to have this whole crazy path structure, right? What this does is rewrite the cookie with a new path and domain, and the cookie is set for Twitter.com, right? But then at that time, see, this person's on the desktop version of Twitter. You can use this CSRF token on the mobile version of Twitter,
as long as you've never been there before in the browser.
Yeah, and then it won't, like the desktop version won't invalidate it because it's on the mobile version, and so on and so forth, right? So interesting. Okay, this one's really cool. It deserves a serious technical deep dive that we just don't have the time for. But if you're interested in it, go read it. It's pretty mind-boggling, and especially on a site like Twitter, and they've got a pretty cracked security team. So this one definitely needed to be creative in order to work. So all right, I think we covered it. We cut out roughly 1,000 links that I'll make sure to put at the bottom of the blog post, but I think we covered all that we wanted to cover.
Yes.
Go check out, Robert wrote a really cool blog post on the White Hat blog. That's one of them. Go check it out. We weren't going to self-promote here, but it's a really
aside from that.
Yeah, aside from that. Go check it out, though. It's really cool research about hashes. We call them magic hashes. Magic.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah.